Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Immeasurably More. I'm your host, Noelle Tomko, and I just want to start this podcast episode by saying Happy Father's Day. You guys will be hearing this just a few days before Father's Day, and when we think of honoring the fathers in our church, our fathers who are listening, men who are about to become fathers or want to be or have been for 40, 50, 60 years and beyond, we just want to say thank you, and that the role of a father is so hugely important, and we wanted to take an opportunity to be able to talk about being a dad and just personal experiences from my guests that are on today. One of the things that I've done a bit of research on is just how negatively impacted homes are when there's an absence of a father. And so today I wanted to hear from two dads who are very present and involved in their families, who have modeled their families after the model of Christ and after the model of leadership that we read about in Scripture. And so they're both in different seasons. One has now adult children. The other one has teenagers and toddlers in the house. But I think what you'll hear is a lot of similarities in the way that they've chosen to run their homes. And I'm excited to have the conversation with them today. So please help me in welcoming and supporting Jim Davidson and Tim Lafferty to the podcast. Guys, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Again, happy Father's Day to you.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we'll just kind of get into what we talked about. If you wouldn't start, Jim, I think I'll start with you. If you wouldn't mind just kind of telling us a little bit about your family, which I know you love talking about. So if you could kick us off, that'd be great.
Yes. No, I appreciate that. My family obviously is most important to me. Mm-hmm. So I have, as you said, 2 adult children. I've got a son who's 34, just became a licensed attorney. Mm-hmm. So I'm very proud of him. Without being an attorney, but even more proud of him now. And my daughter has got 3 of my first grandchildren, and she'd probably shoot me for saying that because I don't expect her to have more. But
she's young; she might.
Yep, she might. But my son will eventually. But anyway, I've got a fantastic son-in-law, beautiful daughter, and 3 grandbabies, and 3 grandsons. And yes, 3 grandsons who are farm boys all the way, and they definitely have energy, and they're so much fun. So
I bet you and Mary just have the best time with them.
Yes, yep. Mary is their best friend, and I try to be when I'm not working. So I'm always harassing Mary because she gets more time with them than I do. So
I saw her in church the other day, and she said, I just wish I could spend all day with them. And I thought, what a beautiful thought to already parent your own children well into adulthood, and they're successful and they've got these beautiful families, and you get through all of that, the years that it took, which there are hard years in that as well as good ones. And then to want to almost do it all over again as a grandparent, it's so great. And you and Mary have been here at the church for a long time. I mean, since you were very newly married, and you guys got married young. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Married at 18, and started coming here. I started coming here just prior to that, and we've been here for 37 years now.
That's great. And Jim, for those who don't know, he serves on our board of elders. You do a lot of things for the church, but you're also an elder and have been for almost 30 years. Yeah. Right.
Yep. 27 years.
That's great. And you're from this area?
Yes. 20 miles, 25 miles from here. Yeah.
So this is home, really.
Oh, it is.
The church is your home. The people here are your
family.
Home.
Yeah, they're family. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And then Tim, yours is a little bit different, as in you were originally from here, but you've kind of moved to several different places, and now you're back raising your own family.
That's right. Yeah. So I started coming here when I was a teenager for a little while. But anyways, my wife and I, Alani, you may know her from the church, we have 3 children. And we also have news, 1 on the way. So I'm going to be a dad of 4. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah,
congratulations. Yes.
I know it's definitely nerve-wracking for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about that. And
but really, how much could you mess up?
A lot.
Yeah. You already have 3, so it takes a little bit of pressure off.
It does. Yeah. There's a lot of I guess the baby stages. I'm experienced with changing diapers.
Yeah, so. That's true. Yeah.
And yeah, so I started coming here when I was a teenager for a little while, and then I actually ended up I think I was about 16 when I started coming. I was here for about 2 years, and then I was off for the military, and I left, and that's where I met Alani, actually, is just after I got out of the military. Then when we moved back here, so we've been coming here now for about 3 years, and currently I help serve as the safety team member. So
yeah, and you have family in the church as well.
I
right?
do.
Yeah.
I do. I have Alexis and Josh Bangler, who are my direct siblings. So, well, obviously not Josh, but
yeah, Alexis and her husband and their 3 boys.
And their 3 boys, yes.
So one of the things I have appreciated about this church so much, when my husband and I were looking for a church to call home, because we had moved from about an hour away, and we just didn't want to do the commute anymore to where we were going. But one of the things we learned early and continue to hear stories of is that there are multi-generational families in this church, which I think speaks volume to just being rooted in a good Bible teaching, Bible believing, Bible behaving church. Is that, there's so many people whose grandparents and great-grandparents and their great-great-grandparents have gone to this church, and they've been raised in the church. I was talking to John, our engineer of the podcast, earlier today, and he said he's been coming here since he was 3 years old.
That's cool.
You meet other people who they've never known another church, and that they still want to call this place home, I think is so important. And how wonderful that you guys get to raise your children and your grandchildren here as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So Jim, you've got 2. You kind of have already, for lack of a better term, succeeded in your parenting, right? They're out of the home. They've got families. They've got careers. They still really enjoy you and your wife.
Yep.
They haven't.
We love being together.
Yeah,
Yes.
which I think that to me is a sign of a successful family. I had a coworker of mine who her 2 children are so often with her and her husband. They enjoy vacationing together, doing the weekends together. And that's so encouraging. It's like, you had to have known you did something right in your parenting if your children are constantly coming back to be around you, and that they want their children around you. And then you've got a teenager.
Yeah.
2 toddler age-ish.
Yes.
And 1 on the way.
Yes.
So when we were preparing for this, I said, Jim, I really am thankful that you're willing to share your wisdom on parenting and anything you've learned along the way. And then Tim, you're in the trenches of it, which myself and my husband can appreciate, because we too have a teenager in the home and 2 toddlers. And you sort of lose track of time a little bit when you're in that season, where it's just like making it from one day to another. You kind of get to the end of the week and you're like, we survived. I think we did everything right, and any mistakes we made, we apologized for, and I think our kids will be fine. You're just always hoping that your kids are not going to need a lot of therapy when they get older. So tell me a little bit about, I heard some similarities when we talked the first time about your guys' upbringings, and what I appreciated so much hearing about that was you guys both lived in very different environments than what you decided to create in your own household. And I think that's encouraging for people who are listening to this, especially fathers who are the leaders of their home, to know that you can do things different. That if life didn't start out the best for you and your own family, or as peaceful as maybe you would have liked it, that you can take control and change that. So Jim, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about what you kind of knew of fatherhood before you became a father. Okay.
Yeah. I will say it's very natural and very easy to take with you what you've learned. It's kind of a learned behavior from your parents. And in my home, growing up, I had 2 great parents. They both loved me. They both taught me different things. My mom's the one that introduced me to God, period. So one of the greatest blessings of life. My dad, was a very honest man, full of integrity. But other than that, I had a father that had anger issues, and he would be very angry and not abusive, physically, but sometimes it would verge on the mental abuse, and my mother would. She had her issues, but she would also provoke his anger. so it became
easy for wives to do that,
sometimes, and but it goes hand in hand. Everybody's got some responsibility there. So because of that, there was a lot of chaos in the home, a lot of throwing and screaming and hollering, and an older brother that was in and out of prison, and it was just a very chaotic family growing up. And it's to the point where I was extremely excited to get out and start my own life.
Would you say, Jim, that sometimes I think I have learned this as being the youngest in my family as well, is that when you are in this environment of chaos, sometimes the youngest almost sees it more than the older siblings. It's almost like that chaos grows as the family grows, and then when you're the youngest and you're looking up at all of this, it's big. I mean, it's overwhelming sometimes.
No, that's right. And I was the youngest of three boys. 10 years. When I was 10 years old, I had a baby sister that was born. And then when I left the house, exactly what you're saying there, that was probably the hardest thing for me leaving, period, was leaving my little sister, because I knew I was leaving her in that.
Yeah.
So that was extremely difficult. But yeah, so because I thought the same thing about her. I thought, wow, she's got to take the brunt of it now, because she's all alone. But and I'm, like I said, there was good times and bad times.
Yeah.
So.
And one of the things I shared with my husband after we all met the other day is that one of the first things you said when you were talking about the family that you and Mary have built was that you decided very early in your marriage that you were going to have a home of peace.
Yes.
And that that's continued. That is something that you've stayed steadfast in chasing, is that we're going to have peace in our home because God resides here and he's a God of peace.
Yes.
And I think that's very encouraging to people. Like I said, that we are responsible for breaking cycles. We're responsible for getting out of them. And I think you can't meet anybody, church or otherwise, who's not lived through something.
That's right.
That they probably would have preferred maybe not to. But we have a choice whether we want to let that carry on or we want it to come to an end. And I think you answered that because I asked if your kids fought a lot when they were like younger siblings. And you were like, no, because we were going to have a home of peace.
Yeah, and it's a choice, and it's attainable. You think, wow, that's just the way it's the way I've always known it to be. And and my wife as well. They had a lot of fighting in her home, so we kind of both decided that. But and it was I've always said there's power in the choice, and especially if you choose to let Christ help you with it, So yeah, there was times, very difficult times. I mean, one time in particular, I actually walked my parents to my door and said, I'm sorry, but you're always welcome in my home, and you're welcome to come back when you quit fighting. And so that was very difficult. Probably one of the hardest conversations I've ever had with my parents. You're supposed to honor your parents, and but I left my father and mother, cleaved to my wife.
Yeah,
I have a family to take care of, and so it was, it changed and it remained, and wow, what a blessing! I mean, we've lived a rich life, and we've loved it.
So let me ask, because my mind goes to, first of all, it's incredible, and you made the right decision, and your family, like we talked about, they're older now and they have their own homes, but they still always want to come back to you and your wife, because they that's home, that's love there.
Sure.
What were some of the ways, since you both came out of a situation where there was a lot of anger and chaos, what are some of the ways that you and Mary combated that? Like, how did you fight against that? Was it always to immediately go to prayer? Was there like any practical thing that you kind of started early on that helped you get out of those times of fighting if somebody was on the verge?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's just kind of a practicality in life in general. You set boundaries. So we set boundaries up, and we decided that if we disagree, we're going to disagree behind closed doors, and we're not going to let our children see that. And so we would, and of course, probably the biggest thing that has helped us is we also made a choice that I'm not going to try to fix my wife, and my wife's not going to try to fix me, but we would continue to to strive to get closer to God and let God fix her, let God fix me, and then we got to enjoy the best of each other, because He fixed us. So, and then in turn, my children got to enjoy the best of it, and and they children need to see you handle conflict, but at the same time, they also need to see you united together
and to forgive.
Yeah, absolutely.
To show grace.
Yeah.
It seems like such a simple thing, but it's so powerful that we can't expect our children not to fight if all they see is us fighting. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like if we're like, oh, you can't do that. And they're thinking, I just saw you and Dad yelling at each other in the kitchen over dinner or whatever, you know? It's like they model that easily. You don't always think about it in the moment.
No.
In the moment, you either just want to be right, or you just want to be heard, or you just feel like having a bad attitude. Yeah. Because we are human. But I think one of the important things too is that you didn't come to this like when your kids were teenagers. You had set this policy and this boundary in place to say, this is the type of family we're going to have. That's not to say that if you are in a current situation of chaos that you can't change it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But it starts with that boundary.
Yeah. And it starts with today, whatever day that is, starts with today, and you just move forward and, but it's, I think one of the things parents really should understand is, as a kid that listens to that all the time, you'll go to bed at night crying and wondering if your dad's going to hurt your mom, or he never did, but you wonder those kind of things as a child. So I just was not going to ever allow my kids to ever think that, so.
That's good. There's something in the psychiatry world called ACEs. They're called adverse childhood experiences. And it's a big thing in psychology that talks about when you live in the house with this chaos, with this anger, and with this violence, it changes the way that you see fear.
Yes.
So the example that they give is that most children, if you're walking along in the woods and you see a bear, you're going to freak out because that bear could hurt me. Right. But when you grow up in a home that's filled with these ACEs, sometimes the home is the bear.
Yes.
And so you just, as a calming mechanism, just become, indifferent to fear. It's almost like a survival skill that gets like turned off.
It is, absolutely.
And it can be hard to undo, but obviously we know we serve a God that can and is willing to do anything.
Yes.
And your situation was not very unlike Jim's in terms of there was like some chaos just in brokenness of families and moving around. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, so I'll be right off the bat. I don't know my biological father that well. My mom separated from him and took me and my sister at a very early age. So my memories are very, very foggy about him.
Yeah.
But what I do remember is that he was angry, and I was scared of him.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, my mom and my sister, they would tell me stories of what he did. And he actually ended up putting me in the hospital when I was 2. And, and just, so like I said, my memories are not that great of him.
Yeah.
And as life went on, and as my mom opened up more and more to me about what he did, he wasn't somebody that definitely needed Jesus, if that's all I can say,
Sure.
So, but the cool thing is that my mom eventually did leave, and she remarried, and this man that I still call Dad to this day, he adopted me and my sister, and gave me 5 other brothers and sisters. So we had a really good home. I was rescued, I think, from that. But it didn't have its trouble, or it didn't go without its troubles either.
Sure. Yeah.
But overall, my childhood, I would say it was very good. I had everything I needed physically. And my dad, he took care of us. He provided for us.
Yeah.
But it was my mom who took care of the spiritual, the mental, and the emotional more than my dad. I felt like it was my mom that took me to church. It was my mom that set up prayer. It was, I know my dad had a relationship, but I don't feel like he stood up the way he should have sometimes. So
I think when we were talking, you had said something along the lines of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that he maybe didn't have the best model. And
that's right. He didn't have a dad. He was raised by his mom and his aunt, and he didn't have that model to look after. And so it's kind of like you said, you can kind of carry on what you were taught from your fathers if you don't look to Jesus to help you on that. So it's very easy, very simple to just do what you know and what you were taught. Yeah. So it was, like I said, it was a pretty good childhood. There's not a whole lot of complaints. But then you left. I did. I ran away. Having a big family like that was pretty tough. I felt like I was responsible. Well, I was responsible for a lot.
Yeah, because you were the oldest boy.
I was the second oldest in the family, the oldest boy.
Yeah.
Babysitting at that age, or babysitting a lot, was really tough.
Most teenage boys don't want to do that.
No, I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
There was times it was fun. Don't get me wrong. I still remember plenty of stories. Throwing my youngest like a football, and I remember pushing.
Your mother loved that.
Yes. Pushing our brothers down the stairs in baskets, and I mean, we did have
all the things that are illegal now.
Yes. But we did have a wild time. I have a lot of good memories, if that makes sense. But it eventually became overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I was ready to move on. I was done being, I felt like a lot of times I was a dad there.
Yeah.
As being the older sibling, trying to take care of my brothers, the responsibilities, the chore list.
I think that's not an uncommon feeling when you're an older one of multiple siblings.
Right.
I mean, I think that's why people used to have very large families, though, too.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
absolutely,
You know,
because
so
we all took part into
on the farm, and
Help out
it
with
was
the
like
work,
you
yeah.
got another employee, So that's not an uncommon thing. But I'm sure when you're a teenager, I mean, one of the things I've learned about teenagers, just like in my career, and I feel very blessed with the children that I have, but I've seen situations happen with teenagers where it can be a very selfish time in our lives, where we really kind of forget that the world exists, and it's
Yes.
very much just us. What about me? And so I imagine if you feel like, well, this is someone else's job,
Right.
and I'm here doing this, and I don't want to do this, and
That's
I
right.
can't really say that I would not have wanted to run away too, maybe in that same situation, because you do just sort of look inward in that time in our lives, and not so much at everybody else and what their needs are.
Yeah, and I mean, I loved my brothers. I do remember lots of love for my brothers. Also lots of irritation, but I remember taking care of whenever there was a newborn. I remember always being right there with my mom, helping change diapers, take care of them, put them to sleep, give them baths. So I always had that kind of that love for children.
Do you think at that time you would have ever had the thought that it was preparing you to
No,
be a
but my
father?
mom told me.
Yeah.
She would always say stuff, it's gonna help you for when you're a dad. And then I remember there were times I wanted to be a dad, and then there was times I was like, nah, no, I'm not gonna ever be a dad because this is too crazy.
Because I already did it as a teenager.
So,
yeah.
So I did. I ran away and I joined the military. That was my way of running away. Instead of just leaving, I needed somewhere to go, and so I ran away. Joined the military, and that's about when I found Alani, and right after I got out of the military.
Yeah.
And so when we started a family, I remember my childhood, and I remember the father. I remember my dad, my stepdad, the one who adopted me.
Yeah.
He worked a lot. Like I said, I don't felt like he was there for me emotionally, mentally, and spiritually the way I think a father should have been. And I don't hold that against him by any means. He didn't have a father, and so that was something that hurt me, I think, as well as my biological father.
Sure.
Those are things that I remember carrying along with me for a long time. I didn't know I was. I didn't know I was carrying those. I didn't know that how bad it actually hurt me. But until I eventually came to know the Lord, this was after me and Alani got married, and my son was conceived.
Yeah.
Forrest.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Isn't that grace though? That
It
God
is.
not only accepts us, but then he like shows us things through a different perspective, where you could have sat in that hurt. A lot of people do for their whole
Sure,
lives.
they do.
You could have just sat there forever and been like, I'm justified in my anger because I didn't have the father I should have had.
Right.
Which doesn't move you forward at all. But the grace is to say what you just said about your father, was that he didn't provide for me in these ways. It wasn't his fault. He didn't have that either.
Right.
So it's like, it shows a maturity in our walk with the Lord to be able to see things through that perspective. And honestly, I think until we do see things in that perspective, we can't undo the cycle.
Right.
The anger about your cycle sometimes keeps you in the cycle rather than getting out of it and being able to see it for what it was and going, okay, well, I can't change that. I can't change what happened to him. I can't change the way my childhood was, but I can change the way my home is going to be, which I've appreciated that you
And
both
I
shared
can
that
forgive.
you've done, and that you can forgive him.
That was, and like I said, when I found the Lord and when Jesus got a hold of my heart, one of the first things he revealed to me was that I was hurt. I think that was that way he could show me, like, look, I'm here to love on you. I'm here to be your father.
I'm going to be your father.
Yep.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know I was hurt, but it was funny because I ended up, one of the things that helped me see that I was hurt was a book, Wild at Heart by John Eldridge.
Yeah.
When I first came to the Lord, I started picking up books, and then it was one of the books, and that it kind of helped me. It revealed that I was hurt, and that a lot of the things that I was doing was wrong, and it was because of this hurt.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool how he immediately just reached out to me, like, hey, I'm going to be your father now, and you can trust me.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty cool experience. So.
And then from there, that really allows you to trust him to run your home, right? To allow God to be the leader of your home.
Right.
First, he reveals himself to us, because without us knowing them, how can we hand over our family to God to say, well, I'm going to give you control of this situation? But there's a lot of power and freedom in making that choice. And you both made that choice to say, I'm going to allow God to do this differently than what I had as a child. Right. And again, I just think that's encouraging to the listener. So many times we might have people say, you have no idea what I've been through. Fair. We might not.
Sure.
We don't. But I do know what God had to see his son go through.
Right.
And that gives me the ability to be able to trust, to say, like we talked about the other day, holding our children with open hands, holding our spouses with open hands, And one decision I know you both had said you made the right decision was all of this really kind of happened because of the person you married too.
Yes.
That without that marriage, your home life would look very different. Or without, we see, I was just reading a stat earlier that now 1 out of every 4 children in the United States is in a home without a dad.
Wow.
And just the impact that father absence has on mental health, on behavior, on juvenile detention homes, prisons, the stats were astounding. And I thought to myself, you don't always have to get everything right. Just be there.
Yeah.
Like if these kids just even had a present dad. Now on the flip side of that, you might have someone listening saying, well, I wouldn't have wanted my dad there because he used to beat us every day. But if that number could change a little bit,
right?
How would we see that impacting the world? That the presence of a father in the home cannot be replaced by anything else.
Yeah.
It can't.
We need more dads that love their children, and when you love them, you will be there. You'll realize you're working too much, or you need to balance things. You need to adjust the way you're doing things because you love your wife and you love your children. So you're going to make those adjustments.
Yeah.
And we need more dads like that.
Right. And how much we see having the correct leadership, like we talked about in your home, it teaches your children so many different things about life. I mean, even if they never go on to be married, we talked in a different conversation just before this about how some people are called to a life of singleness. Sure. But there's still a correct order of leadership in the world,
there is, right.
And we benefit from staying within that boundary. So we kind of talked a little bit about just, making the decision to allow God to lead your home. And I asked you guys to kind of share some scripture. What scripture would you want to share that kind of helps supporting, that Christ needs to be the center of our marriages and of our parenting?
Oh, me? Go ahead.
I go first this time. That's okay.
It's kind of hard to really put one scripture.
You could share 2.
Or 2 or 3.
Really, the whole book?
The whole book is absolutely correct. But let's go with John 15, 9 through 11.
Yep.
So in this passage, Jesus is talking about the true vine. And one of the things that struck out to me was that there's this deep connection to him and the Father. Mm-hmm. And it says, as the Father loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. Mm-hmm. And these things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. The reason that spoke to me is because I feel like, just like Jesus had this deep connection with God, we are to have that connection with Jesus, and our children can have that connection with us. And that was one of the things that led me, that said, I didn't have that father that was there all the time for me.
Yeah.
I could see all these flaws and where I was hurt. And so I decided that I know I'm not going to be perfect as a dad. I'm not going to be perfect as a father. But if I put everything in Jesus, that at least my children will look back at me and see Jesus. And that was the ultimate goal that I had.
Yeah.
And I wanted to love them the same way that Jesus loved me.
It's interesting. I don't know if you guys would agree with this, but sometimes we can be our own worst critic, and we are present
Right.
for every one of our mistakes.
Yeah.
So even when we're making mistakes and we're alone, we see them and we know about them. And so I think we can be quick to think we don't measure up, or that we're doing things wrong, or whatever. But I thought I would share this with you, that I ran into your sister right before we started recording this. And I said, I'm just getting ready to go record a couple podcasts. And she's like, what topic? And I said, well, your brother's coming in. I said, him and Jim will be in there to talk about it. And I said, it's about fatherhood. And she's like, of course he would talk about fatherhood. He's such a wonderful dad. And I just thought that was really sweet to have your sister say that about you, because
I'm a little embarrassed now.
well, don't be embarrassed.
No, but it's cool.
I think it's nice that other people have a much different view. Like if we just stay centered on what you just said, if we're just constantly trying to point ourselves and our marriages and our children to Christ, what that shows to other people, and that we need to kind of celebrate that a little bit. I think we need to find joy and peace in that situation, to go, okay, God, I'm one day closer to becoming more like you, and thank you for getting me through, and show me again tomorrow what I can do, Right. And then what about you, Jim? I know you always have such great scriptures to share and such wisdom to share with us.
Well, one of the things I was so excited about the other day when we were talking was that, Tim is digging into Proverbs, as a young father.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that part.
And Proverbs has just totally impacted my life, for the better, for raising my family and being a father for my children. And like Tim said, I've read Proverbs over and over again. I've read books on Proverbs, just because there's so much wisdom there.
Yeah.
And I wanted that. Number one, I wanted to put God first in my life. My wife and I decided that early on. But a couple scriptures in Proverbs, was like, in Proverbs 20 verse 7, the righteous man walks in his integrity, and his children are blessed after him. Mm-hmm. That was a strong one for me in leading my family and my children. Proverbs 22:6 says, start children off in the way they should go. When they're old, they're not going to depart from it. I've always said, standing on God's promises and principles, you can't go wrong. So I would always read it and think, okay, God, you said it, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna abide by you, and then in your word, and then you end up looking around you, like I said the other day, you end up looking around you when the smoke's cleared and the children are growing, and you think,
and everybody survived.
Everybody survived, I told my son the other night, he called me and he was, talking about, working, and, he's not sure he could, go through some of the things I went through in life, watching me work and the struggles. And I told him, I said, but you know what? I said, I wouldn't change one single minute. I said, because I'm sitting on my couch right now feeling like the richest man in the world,
gosh,
and it has nothing to do with, money or riches, but I feel rich because, my family's blessed, God promises to bless my generations. So it is just, to me, I like to say it's a win-win situation. You follow God and you win.
When we were preparing for this, I was talking to my husband because, I grew up in a very, my father was a wonderful man. I don't know my biological family. I've never known my biological family, but my parents who raised me, that's who I always call mom and dad, because that's who raised me. Those are my parents. And my father was a wonderful man, wonderful provider. But I was not raised in a home where I was taught about God. I was not taught about Jesus. And so there was a big void for a very long time until I came to know Jesus when I was 30 years old, which is, quite a bit of life having lived without your creator.
Yeah.
And
you're telling me.
One of the things he was so kind in showing me, at that point I was already a mother and I was doing everything by myself. But one of the things that Jesus was so kind in showing me was what a father should look like for my kids.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, I will do this alone rather than be with anyone who's not going to be this for my children. And I watch my husband be a dad, and he has so much joy in it that it makes me happy to watch him. Like I get this remnants of joy from him on me, just watching how excited he is to be a father. You know, he works long hours. He works a very physical job, and he comes home and you would never know it because he'll stay outside and play with those kids for 3 hours and he'll have a smile on his face the whole time he's doing it. And of course, if he's listening to this, he's probably mortified, you know, and he's probably also thinking like, I'm dead tired when I'm doing that.
That's right.
But sure. They don't know that, you know, and I think God like whispers to me in those moments, like, this is what I had for all of it. Like, this is what a father should find joy in his children. And I'm so glad that you as my daughter are getting to see this. Yeah. And it helps me to encourage people who are in a season of singleness,
yes, or
that are a single parent or who've never been married and don't even know if they will be or have kids, but look at what his model is and don't accept anything less. That's you know,
that's exactly right. You know, I was thinking, Noelle, when you were talking about that, is that, you know, having a daughter that I had to give away, you know, and she's, you know, walking down the aisle, or he asked me to marry her, you know, at the time. And, you know, probably one of the most difficult, you know, times of my life as a dad. However, you know, as I said, that you lean back with a sigh of relief and be thankful, because, you know, it wasn't until that point that I really, truly realized that if I'm ever going to have the opportunity to pick my daughter's husband, it's early when she's watching me model it in front of her.
Yeah, wow.
You know, and you know, she watched a dad that loved her family and watched a dad that, you know, didn't scream and holler and didn't have chaos in the home. You know, and what happens naturally is that a girl, you know, they say the girl, a lot of times they say a girl marries her father, you know,
for good or for bad.
That's right. For good or for bad. Yeah. So when God sent Taylor into her life and she picked him, you know, it was such a blessing. I thought, wow, that's, you know.
Well, if you'll allow me, I'm going to tell you this. You're probably going to cry. I reached out to Mackenzie after our talk to tell her just how fortunate she was to have a dad like you. And I just said, I had the opportunity to talk with your dad about being a dad. And I said, I know that you already know this, but he just loves being a dad so much. And she said, I've counted my blessings for him more than you'll ever know. My dad's the closest representation of our Heavenly Father that I've been blessed enough to grow up with. And now I'm getting emotional, and you're not even my dad. I think everybody in the room is getting emotional. She said, I tell everyone that he's the man he says he is in public, just the same as he was in our private household.
Wow.
And I mean, what more could you want? It's no wonder you sat on your couch and felt like you were the richest man, because, I mean, money, homes, careers, what does it matter? It doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But at the end of the night, like we talked about, we can make mistakes and we can mess up with our kids. But if we have the ability to apologize to them and to ask them to forgive us, that teaches them more about grace and about Jesus than really anything else that we could do, you know, as parents. And I'm grateful that we are part of and serve in a church that is so helpful to men, you know, as they parent and as they are married, and that we're always kind of looking out for each other, and we're kind of seeing who needs help. And I hope that this podcast kind of encourages a little bit more of a conversation with people that maybe don't feel like they have a mentor or don't necessarily feel like they have someone speaking into their lives. It's not easy for men to ask for that.
No,
it is not.
It's not easy for the women too either. And we talk to each other nonstop, you know, but I think we kind of sometimes understand the unspoken thing. But I hope that this podcast just encourages men to say, no matter where you are in your parenting, if God has convicted you that you are not handling things the way he feels is best and healthiest for your family, you can change right now. I mean, right this minute, you can change course, and you can do something different. You can do something better, and you can chase after me, and your children will follow. Like you said, you know, your generations after generations will be blessed because of it. And we're, you know, kind of out of time, but I mean, this is so hard to take a big topic like fatherhood and condense it down to 35 or 40 minutes. And you guys had such great things to share. But if you wouldn't mind, as we wrap up, Tim, I really appreciated, you kind of had, I think it was 4 ways that you feel like you try to remember every day that what your role as a father is. If you wouldn't mind just walking us like just through the 4 like kind of titles of what you feel you're responsible to as a dad.
Yeah. So I know that like we've talked about before, that I'm in the storms of being a dad.
Yeah.
And
Of small people.
some days it is literally I'm looking for the next hour. I'm like, just survive this next hour.
Yeah.
As much as I love my children, I'm just not as natural at it as my wife is. So, or at least she looks very natural, obviously. So I know that when I'm just alone with them, sometimes I have a hard time just trying to handle the chaos. And but I over the course of the last several years, I felt that as a dad, as a father, I'm to care for and take care of 4 pillars. And those pillars are physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional. That I'm to be there as, and it obviously most dads get this pretty easily. They get the physical part pretty well. It means I'm providing for them with food, house, money, protecting.
Yeah.
That kind of does come natural, but where I think dads lack a lot in is what I felt like I was missing, and that's that spiritual, being that spiritual leader. Is my life pointing to Jesus? Am I showing them how to handle a situation, how Christ would want me to handle it?
Yeah.
That the mental, that kind of comes with the physical and the spiritual and the emotional, but just teaching them and helping them have the right way of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And giving them a good education, making sure that education is God-based, faith-based, so that their thinking is clear.
Yeah.
And of course, emotionally, just being there for them, supporting them. When they're crying, at least getting down and being compassionate with them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's brief. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'm sorry, that hurts, I know, but all right, now it's time to toughen up, or whatever it might be.
Just so that they know that you're there and you care.
So they see that you have an emotion, and that it hurts me when I see my children get hurt. They fall down, bang their knees.
But they just want to know that they're seen.
They want to know. So
it's usually the minute you say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, what happened?" they stop crying.
Yeah.
And they're like ready to just tell you with a straight face what happened to their leg. It's like the crying only comes from like, I'm alone and I'm hurting. But when we can show them that we're there, it changes.
And then I feel like God does that for us. He takes care of those 4 pillars in our life.
Yeah.
As soon as we make him the center of our life, he provides for us physically. He's, our spiritual leader, and our mental, our mindset is clear. We don't have that mental issues. And the joy, the deep down joy that we get emotionally from that. And he does that in 3 different ways. And I feel like we should do that too. And then that's provide for them. So you provide the physical, the spiritual, mental, emotional. And you may have to discipline in those areas, and you may have, and then there's building up in those areas.
Yeah.
And it all has to be done out of love.
Yeah.
That's what binds that all together.
And it can seem overwhelming, especially if someone's like listening, right? And they've never had a child, it seems overwhelming, but if we go to him, the Bible tells us that his mercies are new every single morning.
Yes.
And that's something that's gotten me through parenting. I mean, I don't need to worry about tomorrow or thinking about, because I used to be stuck in this mindset of, I'm not going to survive the night. My child's not sleeping. I have a newborn. She's also not sleeping. I'm not going to survive. And I had such great counsel in my life that was just able to remind me that you only need to get through today. Do not worry about if they're going to sleep tomorrow. God will give you the strength that you need to deal with tomorrow's restlessness, if there is any. And what I learned in those seasons was so rich. It didn't always feel like it in the moment, but you as fathers, I think we are required to, not we, because I'm not one, but as fathers, you guys are required to kind of feel like you have to carry it all, but we don't. That's like what I love so much about Jesus is he's like, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And that means for all of it, for parenting, for marriage, for work, for just all of it. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And Jim, as we close, is there just any bit of wisdom for someone who has, quote, survived it that you would share to someone who's maybe new in this or feeling like they might be drowning a bit?
Yeah. Of course, God first and stay in the Word. I mean, His Word is a roadmap to life.
Yeah.
So that has been key. And I'd like to maybe just throw out a little challenge right at the end,
Please.
To them. So, if you're parenting, so to keep 2 things in mind. There's a couple scriptures, one in James 4:14, and basically it says that life is like a vapor. It's here today and going tomorrow, and life is very short. And a lot of us don't want to think about that. That's the topic that everybody just thinks they're going to live forever. But to make an impact while you're here, the next scripture, and it has rung true in my life. and it's 3 John 1:4, and it says, "I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth." And and if so, what that tells me is that since life is a vapor and it's so short, and anything can happen in life in the span of life, but when you get to the end of life and you know that your children are living for God and that they've surrendered to Him and they've got a life, they're going to live in the same rich blessings that you've lived in, and your children and your children's children are going to be the same, and God's going to bless your generations. But the reality of it is that you give your children life when they're born, but if you can introduce them to God and get that relationship with God, then you've not given them life. Through God, you've given them eternity.
Yeah. And
that is so much more, and eternity is not the vapor that life is. So just throwing that challenge out there that if they think along those lines and trust God with everything, they're going to live
it's a great reminder.
A life of eternity.
And what a great perspective, and also kind of freeing.
It is.
Right? If my one job is to teach my children that Jesus is real and that He loves them and they can live with Him forever.
Yeah.
I mean, great. I don't have a million jobs. That's my one job. So everything that I do needs to be centered on that, which is wonderful. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Thank you for being vulnerable and for opening up. And I know that this is going to encourage, a lot of the men who are listening, because you can kind of feel like you're on an island.
I was going to say, I know that just seeing this right here where you got to tell him what his daughter was talking about.
Oh, good.
That was really encouraging to me, because I felt like that's the whole thing I've been trying to say, is that as long as I'm pointing to Jesus, as long as my children look back, and if that's the one thing they see, then I think I've done my job.
Yeah,
that's right.
And
that's what we.
It was really cool to see that, and really cool to hear that.
I didn't even plan to share that, but I think the Holy Spirit just convicted me that he needs to hear his daughter say that. So I was glad that I had that in writing, because I
appreciate it. And you're right; it did make me cry.
Yeah, well, I would cry too if my daughter said that to me. Yeah. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate you. Absolutely. And again, happy Father's Day, and happy Father's Day to all of you who are listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.